You know, it's funny how we tend to think of ourselves as these like completely independent, autonomous beings.
Oh, absolutely. We love the illusion of control.
Right. Like you wake up, you decide what to eat for breakfast, you choose who to love, you make your own decisions at work. It feels like you are the one sitting completely alone in the driver's seat of your life.
Yeah, but you're really, really not.
Exactly. And that's what we're getting into today. What if you aren't alone in that seat? What if trillions of microscopic bacteria are actually pulling the strings on your emotions, your relationships, and maybe even the evolutionary destiny of humanity?
It is a wild concept to wrap your head around for sure.
It really is. In today's deep dive, we are connecting the dots between your gut microbiome, the terrifying global rise of superbugs, and get this, an ancient mythological prophecy.
Yeah, the source material we're looking at today is incredibly ambitious.
It's a huge stack of documents. We've got texts titled Superbug and Kalki, Lovebug, Struggle to Strength, and these really detailed reports on an AI healthcare system called Maya. And just a quick note for you listening, our mission today is to just unpack the author's framework. We're impartially exploring these ideas which blend biology and spiritual philosophy to see how they all connect.
And to really grasp that connection, we have to start with a high-level overview. I mean, for the last century, humanity has essentially waged a brute force war on biology.
Using antibiotics, right?
Exactly. We developed antibiotics and treated the entire microbial world as an enemy that just needed to be annihilated. But nature doesn't just sit there and absorb a century of chemical warfare.
No, it adapts, it fights back.
Right. And to understand the sheer scale of that biological pushback, the coming wave of antimicrobial resistance, or AMR, we first have to understand how these microbes influence our minds on an individual level.
Okay, let's unpack this. So before we get to the fate of the world and these global superbugs, let's zoom all the way in. Like, what is physically happening inside your stomach right now?
Well, we hear the term gut-brain axis thrown around a lot in health circles.
Yeah, usually right next to an ad for, like, probiotic yogurt.
Exactly, yeah. But mechanically speaking, you have to ask, how does a microscopic organism in my intestines actually change a thought in my head?
Right. What's the actual mechanism there?
It operates through a vast bidirectional communication highway. It primarily uses the vagus nerve, which runs straight from your brainstem down to your abdomen.
Okay, so it's a direct physical link.
Yes. For a long time, the scientific consensus was that the brain was the sole dictator of our reality, and the gut was, just a processing plant for your lunch. But we now know the gut bacteria are doing far more than digesting.
What are they doing instead?
They're effectively running a microscopic pharmaceutical factory. These microbes are chemically synthesizing essential neurotransmitters from the raw materials of the food you eat.
Wait, really? Meaning they take something like the amino acids from your breakfast and physically transform them into the chemicals that dictate your mood?
Precisely.
Uh,
They produce serotonin, which regulates your baseline happiness.
Yeah.
They make dopamine, which drives your motivation and reward centers.
oh, wow.
And GABA, too, which acts as the braking system for your nervous system, calming you down. A staggering percentage of these neurotransmitters are manufactured right there in your intestinal tract.
That is insane to think about.
Right. So when we talk about a bacterium influencing a thought, it's doing so by controlling the chemical supply chain that your brain relies on to even formulate that thought.
So if these microbes are manufacturing our core mood chemicals, it completely stands to reason they're also influencing how we treat other people.
Absolutely, it scales up to our social behavior.
Because there's this fascinating thread in the source text, specifically in the documents titled Love Bug and Struggle to Strength. They suggest that bacteria can literally foster empathy and even shape the behavior of children.
Yeah, the texts dive deep into how these microbes produce specific chemical profiles that encourage emotional connection and nurturing relationships.
It essentially argues that our capacity to love and care for one another is heavily subsidized by our microbiome, which leads me to a slightly terrifying deduction, honestly.
Oh, what's that?
Are we basically just a giant walking meat suit for a cosmic operating system run by trillions of microscopic managers? Like, if they control the chemical levers of my empathy, what happens to human free will? Is it just an illusion?
That is the big question. The author's work definitely pushes us to question the boundaries of human autonomy. But rather than viewing it as a microscopic dictatorship, the texts frame it as a profound symbiosis.
Okay, a symbiosis, a partnership.
Exactly. You provide the habitat and the nutrients, and in return, the microbes produce the neurochemicals that keep you mentally stable, empathetic, and socially connected.
So we scratch their back, they scratch ours.
Right. But the breakdown happens when we violate that partnership. When you introduce chronic stress, highly processed diets, or constantly nuke your system with broad-spectrum antibiotics, you trigger something called dysbiosis.
Dysbiosis, which is basically the biological equivalent of a localized ecological collapse, right?
Exactly. The beneficial, empathy-promoting bacteria die off, and the opportunistic ones multiply out of control.
And the resulting chemical chaos echoes right back up that vagus nerve to your brain.
Yeah, and the texts argue that this modern dysbiosis is a hidden engine driving our current epidemics of anxiety, depression, and a fundamental breakdown in human connection. We're chemically inflamed, which makes us behaviorally inflamed.
Man, okay, so this perfectly sets up the broader, more global crisis the author explores. Because if bacteria are so deeply intertwined with our behavior and we've spent 100 years carpet bombing them with antibiotics...
They're going to mount a defense.
Right, and we're seeing that defense right now with the rise of antimicrobial resistance, or AMR, these superbugs that just shrug off our strongest medicines.
Bacteria have survived for 5 billion years. Their passive state toward us was temporary. Now they are actively sharing resistance codes.
Here is where it gets really interesting. The text, Superbug and Kalki, takes this medical crisis and reframes it in a way I have literally never encountered before. It argues that superbugs are not a failure of modern medicine, but a deliberate divine intervention.
It is a massive paradigm shift. The author overlays the biological reality of AMR with Hindu mythology, specifically the concept of the Kali Yuga.
Right, and for our listeners, in that tradition, the Kali Yuga is the current epoch we are living in, right? An age characterized by deep corruption, discord, arrogance, and a total disconnection from truth and cosmic order.
Yes, the cosmic order being known as Rita. And according to the text, we violated that cosmic order by treating the human body as a battlefield rather than an ecosystem.
We arrogantly believed we could just conquer nature for profit and convenience.
Which brings us to Kalki.
Hmm.
In the mythology, Kalki is the 10th and final avatar of the preserver deity Vishnu.
And Kalki is prophesied to arrive at the absolute peak of the Kali Yuga's corruption, to dismantle the broken systems and restore the Rita.
Exactly. And the author's staggering thesis here is that Kalki is not a man on a white horse. Kalki is the superbug.
Okay, I have to push back a little here, or at least dig into the mechanics, because on the surface, comparing a single-celled organism to a Hindu deity riding a horse with a blazing sword, isn't that stretching a metaphor to its breaking point?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's not meant to be taken as a literal comparison, but a structural one. And the texts point to a very specific biological hardware to justify this. The plasmid.
The plasmid. Okay, break that down for us.
The plasmid is the key to everything with AMR. You see, bacteria don't just evolve vertically from parent to offspring. They have a mechanism called horizontal gene transfer.
Which means they share traits with their neighbors?
Right. A plasmid is a tiny circular piece of DNA that floats inside the bacterium, completely separate from its main chromosome. It acts like a microscopic flash drive loaded with survival codes.
I love that analogy, a microscopic flash drive.
Yeah. When one bacterium figures out how to survive an antibiotic, it writes that code onto a plasmid, sidles up to a completely different bacterium, and literally hands over the instruction manual.
So they're basically open sourcing their resistance against us.
Exactly. And the text connects this circular DNA, the plasmid, directly to a mythological symbol called the srivatsa.
The srivatsa. That's the symbolic mark on Kalki's chest in the ancient texts, right? And it's said to possess the power to break matter into atoms.
Right. And the author points out the brilliant structural parallel here. Think about how plasmids actually neutralize our drugs.
How do they do it?
They carry genetic codes that instruct the bacteria to produce specific enzymes, like beta-lactamyces. These enzymes act as molecular scissors that physically hunt down the antibiotic molecules and cleave their chemical rings open.
Whoa, so they literally break the matter of the pharmacological drugs down into harmless atoms?
Exactly. Rendering our strongest weapons completely useless.
Okay, that structural parallel is actually fascinating. The white horse represents the unstoppable momentum of this horizontal gene transfer spreading across the globe.
Yep.
And the blazing sword is the enzymatic cutting through of our corrupt illusions. The illusion being our arrogance that we can dominate biology forever with synthetic chemicals?
Precisely. The superbug is a systemic shock designed to dismantle a medical system built on dependency and fear.
It dismantles the hubris of the Kali Yuga. But, okay, if this biological reset is meant to wipe away corruption and usher humanity into an era of truth, the Satya Yuga, it raises a really critical question for me about targeting.
How so?
Well, a bacterium doesn't have eyes. It doesn't have a moral compass. How does this microscopic intelligence know who to infect? How does it differentiate between someone perpetuating the corruption of the Kali Yuga and someone who is living harmoniously?
Right, that's the big hurdle. The author answers this with a concept called viral coding, using the analogy of twin A and twin B.
Hmm.
Let's break down that behavioral sorting mechanism.
Yeah, let's get into the twins.
In the author's framework, viruses, like COVID for example, act essentially as initial software updates. They sweep through the population to identify and tag individuals based on their behavior and alignment with Dharma, or cosmic law.
Okay, so twin A represents someone acting in accordance with Dharma. They are honest, kind, caring, and mindful of their connection to others.
And twin B represents the opposite. Twin B ignores the subconscious mind, inflicts trauma, and acts out of deep-seated fear, greed, or malice.
The texts refer to this behavioral archetype as a rakshasa, right? Like a demon or a destructive force.
Exactly. The framework claims that the viruses tag the Rakshasas, and the ensuing superbug infections execute the purge, eliminating those who tilt the balance of the earth toward destruction.
Now, before we explore the implications of this, I want to pause and just to reiterate something for you listening. This is a massive philosophical leap.
A very big leap, yes.
We are looking at a unique framework from the author that blends virology with ancient spiritual philosophy. We are unpacking this as a fascinating thought experiment presented in the source material. We're not endorsing a literal, peer-reviewed interpretation of viruses acting as moral judges.
That is a vital context to keep in mind. But returning to the internal logic of the author's theory, this viral tagging functions as a biological great filter, an evolutionary test for the human species to rectify our genetic codes.
But looking at this filter, there is a glaring, terrifying loophole.
Oh yeah, the proximity issue.
Right. If the superbugs are systematically targeting the twin Bs, the Rakshasas, what happens to the good, honest people? The twin As who just happen to be sitting next to a coughing twin B on a crowded subway. Do they just magically repel the bacteria because they follow Dharma?
They absolutely do not, and the texts confront this tragic reality head-on. A highly resistant superbug will colonize the lungs of an honest person just as quickly as a corrupt one if they share the same physical airspace.
So the innocent are caught in the crossfire.
Yes, the honest, care-loving people will absolutely suffer and die if they try to stay in contact with the infected.
Which means they become collateral damage. Not because they were targeted by the biological purge, but because of human geography and, honestly, panic.
Panic is the real killer here.
Think about your own instincts. When you wake up with a high fever and a deep cough, what is your immediate overriding emotion? It's fear.
And fear drives terrible behavioral decisions. When people panic over early viral symptoms, they don't stay home.
No, they rush to overcrowded hospital emergency rooms.
Exactly. And they demand antibiotics from their doctors for viral infections, which is useless against the virus, but it further accelerates the mutation of superbugs in their gut.
And the hospitals themselves become the epicenters of this evolutionary purge, because that's where the most vulnerable people and the most resistant bacteria all converge in one room.
So if you are twin A, the good, honest person, and you panic over a minor cough, you might drive yourself straight into the crossfire.
Which leads to a really sobering realization. We cannot outmedicate this evolution. If the plasmid scissors are destroying our drugs and the innocent are at risk of stumbling into the purge zones, survival isn't about finding a stronger pill anymore.
No, it's not. Survival depends entirely on changing human behavior before the hospital doors even open.
And that is the pivotal transition in the source texts. The author argues that because we can't rely on pharmacology anymore, we have to rely on behavioral modification. This is where the solution of Dr. Maya comes into play.
Right, Maya, which stands for Medical Advice You Access, utilized through a system like the Prima kiosk or a personal device.
Let's examine how Maya actually functions, because the texts are very explicit about its limitations. It's an AI system, but it does not treat disease.
No, it's not a magical cure.
It won't prevent death for the evil Rakshasa archetype that tilts the balance of the earth. The reset will still happen. Its sole purpose is to protect the good, honest people from walking into the crossfire.
Maya functions as a behavioral shield against panic. Think about how a person interacts with it. When you feel the very first signs of illness, instead of letting your brain spiral into worst-case scenarios, you interact with Maya.
It guides behavior at the earliest stage.
Yes. It uses advanced pattern recognition of your symptoms to categorize your risk level using a really simple, intuitive, color-coded system.
Right, so red means it's a genuine emergency, seek immediate hospital care. Blue indicates a significant infection risk that requires a doctor or pharmacist.
Green means monitor your symptoms. And yellow means this is a minor issue requiring self-care and isolation at home.
The mechanism here isn't medical, it's purely psychological.
Exactly. The author outlines a specific sequence that Maya facilitates. Calm thinking leads to clear thinking, which leads to right action.
I love that. Calm thinking leads to clear thinking, leads to right action. So when the system tells an honest, anxious person, you are yellow, your symptoms match a standard viral profile. Stay home, hydrate, and isolate. It acts as an emotional circuit breaker.
It intercepts the fear. It removes the panic that makes you grab your car keys and drive to a waiting room filled with superbugs. And that early home isolation is the linchpin of the entire survival strategy.
Because if you isolate immediately, you don't spread the initial virus to your family, you don't spread it to your community, and crucially, you keep non-critical patients out of the hospital infrastructure, starving the superbugs of new hosts.
The data projections the author provides to back this up are staggering. Without intervention, if we continue our current trajectory of fear-driven hospital rushes and antibiotic misuse,
What are the numbers?
antimicrobial resistance is projected to cause up to 16 million deaths annually by 2050.
16 million, that's devastating.
But by implementing Maya, by simply using an early warning AI to encourage isolation and reduce panic within families, that number drops from 16 million down to 3.8 million.
Wow, over 12 million lives saved.
Yeah.
And it's not achieved by inventing a new super drug or a magical vaccine. Those 12 million deaths are prevented entirely by managing human fear and modifying our initial behavior when we feel sick.
What's fascinating here is it fundamentally rewrites our approach to healthcare. The texts are arguing that genes are not destiny. Drugs are no longer the ultimate solution.
Behavior is the bridge between survival and collapse.
Exactly. If humanity continues to ignore the early signals of illness, if we keep demanding unnecessary medicine to soothe our anxiety, and if we keep acting out of blind fear and denial, the AMR wave will completely overwhelm us.
But if we can shift toward awareness, if we take personal responsibility for our health, utilize tools like Maya to stay calm and isolate early to protect our communities, then AMR becomes something else entirely.
It ceases to be the apocalypse and becomes the force that transforms how we live. It forces us to slow down, to respect the microbial world, and to act with genuine empathy.
The future of human health will not be decided by who has the most potent drugs. It will be decided by who understands behavior, who can control their fear, and who acts before it's too late. So let's zoom back out and look at the incredible arc we've just covered. We started with the microscopic bacteria in your gut, organisms that manufacture your serotonin and essentially subsidize your capacity for empathy and love.
We followed the consequences of our 100-year war against those microbes, leading to the rise of superbugs equipped with circular DNA that literally disassemble our strongest drugs.
A biological phenomenon the author equates to the mythological Kalki avatar dismantling a corrupt age. And finally, we looked at how survival in this new era won't come from a pill, but from behavioral AI like Maya, teaching us to replace panic with calm, early isolation.
It completely upends the modern medical narrative, and it leaves us with one final, very provocative concept to mull over.
What's that?
Well, for over a century, we've operated under the assumption that the human body is a fortress that must be defended at all costs. We viewed every single invisible microbe as an invading army to be destroyed.
Yeah, the total war approach.
Right. But if the author's premise holds true, if the great filter of our species is entirely biological, then what if the key to human survival isn't building a sharper sword or a stronger antibiotic?
What is it then?
What if the key to our future is finally learning how to negotiate a lasting peace treaty with the trillions of invisible organisms we share our world and our own bodies with?
A peace treaty with the unseen. That is something to seriously think about the next time you wake up with a little tickle in your throat. When that moment comes, are you going to declare war out of fear, or are you going to listen, stay calm, and isolate? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope it gave you as much to think about as it gave us. Keep questioning the systems around you, keep learning about the complex world inside you, and most importantly, stay curious.